Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's tutorial I'll be showing you how I made this beautiful gathered dress. The upper part has a princess that bustier cut, and the lower part, the skirt part, is gathered. And I have attached inner pockets to this dress, and this dress is fully lined. If this is what you would like to learn, please watch to the end of this video. My appreciation goes to all my returning subscribers. You guys are amazing. And if this is your first time seeing my video or checking out my channel, you're welcome. Please click on the subscribe button icon to subscribe to this channel, and also on the notification bell beside the subscribe button to be notified every time I upload a new video. Thank you. So for this tutorial, I'll be cutting directly on my fabric. I'll be cutting the front part first. So I folded my fabric and my lining piece into two to cut the front. So to know the amount of fabric you put on fold, you use the biggest body circumference. In this case, my bust is the biggest circumference, so I'll be folding quarter of the bust measurement plus extra 4 to 5 inches. So here I have quarter of the bust measurement I'm working with plus extra 5 inches, and for the length I have the half length plus extra 1.5 inches. So that is how I folded my fabric. The first thing I'm going to do will be to rule out a straight line at the top, which would act as my shoulder line. So I'm going to rule this line, and from this line I'm going to take every other vertical measurement. From the shoulder line to 9 inches is the chest line, and from the shoulder line to 16 inches is the half length. And I'm also going to take extra half inch for joining allowance, joining the upper bodice to the lower parts. So I'm going to repeat these measurements again and then make them into straight lines. I'm going to label the chest line as CL and the half length as HL. I'm also going to take the measurement from the shoulder line to 10.5 inches as the bust point line, and from the shoulder to 13.5 inches as the under bust line, and I'm going to make these measurements into straight lines as well. I'll also label the bust point as BP and the under bust as UB for easy understanding. On the shoulder line, I'm going to measure 3 inches, and then I'm going to take another measurement 8 inches. At the 8 inches point, I'll come down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope and then connect it to the 3 inches point I noted earlier, and this is for the front shoulder slope. Then on the shoulder line, I'm going to impute 8 inches, which is half of the shoulder measurement, and I'm also going to bring down that measurement on the chest line, and I'll connect these 2 points from the chest line to the shoulder line. Then I'm going to find what I have between the shoulder slope and the chest line. This line I just ruled, I will find the midpoint of that line, and at the midpoint I will come in by half an inch for the front armhole. On the chest line, I'm going to impute 9.5 inches, which is quarter of the bust measurement. So I'm imputing the bust measurement here, and then using a French curve, I'm going to connect from the measurement of the bust to the half inch I came in by, and then to the shoulder slope, as you can see me demonstrate, and this is for the front armhole. Next, I'm going to impute half of the nipple to nipple measurement or the bust span measurement on the bust line, the under bust line, and on the half length. So half of the nipple to nipple measurement I'm working with in this case is 4.25 inches, and to that I would add extra half inch to make it 4.75 inches, and I've imputed that on the bust point, the under bust, and on the half length lines, and I'm going to join everything together with a straight line. Then I'm going to take my darts. So inward of this line, towards the inner part of this line, at the waistline, I'm going to take half an inch for the darts, and towards the side of this line, I'm going to take 1.5 inches for darts. This will make it a total of 2 inches darts that I will be removing from the waistline. On the under bust, at the inner part, I'm taking 1 inch, and at the outer part I'm taking 1.5 inches, making it total of 2.5 inches that's removed from the under bust line. So I'm connecting what I have on the under bust to the half length, and I'm going to extend that into the half-inch joining allowance I have. Then from the bust point, I'll come down by 1 inch and then connect the dart legs I have on the under bust to this 1 inch I came down by. I would use a French curve to connect as I'm demonstrating. So for the princess that's from the armhole, I'm going to measure the curve I have for the armhole. I'm going to measure everything I have there. And when I measured, I had about 9 inches, and half of 9 inches is 4.5 inches. So from the shoulder slope, I would measure 4.5 inches and then add extra half-inch joining allowance to that because I'm cutting directly on my fabric, making it 5 inches. So I've noted that I will be connecting that to the bust point, but not directly on the bust point. From the bust point, I would come up by half an inch. I'm coming up by half an inch at the bust point, and then I'm going to connect from the armhole to this half-inch I came up by. So after doing this, I'm going to take that on the from the armhole. So on on either side of this line I just made from the armhole, I'm going to take a dart of 3/4 of an inch on both sides. That's 0.75 inches. So in total, I'll be taking out 1.5 inches that from the armhole. So I'll divide that into two, taking 3/4 on one side and 3/4 on the other side. So that is what I'm doing now. I'm going to take 3/4 on both sides of this line, and I'm still going to connect this dart to the half-inch I came up by from the bust point. So that is what I'm doing now. So after connecting this, to avoid having shortage, I'm going to replace this 1.5 inches I would be removing for that. So I'm going to measure from the lower dart leg, the inner dart leg. I'm going to measure up 1.5 inches extra so that I don't have shortage. So you can see how I've connected that, and I'll be connecting that back to the chest line, and this will be the new armhole. But before I do that, I'll check what will be cut off from the chest line when the dart is removed. I would measure what I have there, and I have about half an inch, and I'm replacing that on the chest line. So I'm then going to connect from the 1.5 inches I came down, I went up by, I'm connecting down to the chest line, and this will be the new armhole. So this will be the new armhole for the front part. So I'm going to take my circumference measurement. I've already imputed quarter of the chest bust on the chest line. So on the waistline, I'm going to impute 8.5 plus the 2 inches I'll be removing for that. That would make it 10.5 inches. Quarter of the waist is 8.5 plus the extra 2 inches for the dart, which is 10.5, and I'm going to add another 2.5 inches to that. 1 inch for joining the center front and the side front together, and then 1.5 inches side allowance. And I've also added this side allowance to the chest line as well, 2.5 inches on the chest line and on the waistline. For the neckline, I'll be taking a neck width of 3.5 inches and a neck depth of 7 inches. This is going to be a V neckline. So I'm taking 3.5 inches by 7 inches. So I'll just connect this. I would use the curved part of my French curve to connect this together because I want it a bit deep wider. But if you want it to be narrowed down, you use a straight ruler to connect this, but I'm going to use a curved ruler to connect the neck width to the neck depth. I'm also going to take half-inch joining allowance at the shoulder area. So I'm taking half-inch for joining the front shoulder to the back shoulder. I'll connect, and then before I cut out this, I'm going to smoothen out all the sharp edges around the curve I've made for the princess cut. So I'm making sure that nothing is sharp so that it will be easy to join the center front and the side fronts together. So I'm smoothing out the sharp parts, and before I cut also, I would check my measurement to make sure that I replaced all the dots that will be cut out, and you should also do the same. Check that the measurement is complete and correct, and that all the allowances have been added, because this is on the fabric. So after doing that, I'll go ahead and cut out this part, the front part. So before cutting, I just decided to measure out the side seam allowance, which is 1.5 inches. I've measured that out so you can see the allowance for the side seam. And make sure if you're cutting the fabric and the lining together that you pin them together so that it doesn't shift while you are cutting. So guys, as you're watching, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Please click the like button icon to like this video so that other people can see it. And if you're yet to subscribe to this channel, please do well to click on the subscribe button to also subscribe. So this is it for the front part. I'll quickly go into the back part. So for the back, I've folded my fabric and lining into two like I did for the front, and I've measured out 1.5 inches zipper allowance, and I've ruled it, and all measurements to start from the zipper allowance. And from the zipper allowance, I have quarter of the bust measurement plus extra 3 inches, and the length of the back part is the same length as the front part. Just like I did for the front, I'm going to rule a straight line, which would be the shoulder line, and every other vertical measurement would start from this line. So from this shoulder line, I'm going to measure 9 inches for the chest line, 16 inches for the half length, and extra half inch for joining like I did for the front. I'll turn everything into a straight line. All these points, I'm making them into a straight line. Same thing like I did for the front part. Then on the shoulder line, I'm going to measure the 3 inches and also the 8 inches. At the 8 inches point, for the back, I'll come down by half inch. For the back shoulders loop, I came down by half inch on the 8 inches point, and I connected to the 3 inches point. And then I'm imputing 8 inches, which is half of the shoulder, on the chest line, and I'm connecting the measurements on the chest line to the shoulder loop. Then I'm going to impute quarter of the bust measurement on the chest line, and I've done that. I would find what I have from the shoulder slope to the chest line. I would get the midpoint of that and note it on this straight line, and then I'm going to use a French curve and connect for the back armhole. For the back armhole, I did not come in by half an inch. For the back part, for the back dart, I'm going to measure 4.25 inches on the chest line and on the waistline. I did not add any allowance to this, and I've ruled a straight line. On the waist, I'm taking half inch on both sides, and from the chest line I came down by 1 inch, and I'll be connecting the dart leg to this 1 inch I came down by from the chest line, and this will be for the back dart. I will extend this into the seam allowance, the join allowance I have down. Then at the folded edge of this fabric, at the zipper allowance, to eliminate zip bulge, I'm going to take 3/4 of an inch at the waistline. So I'm taking 3/4 of an inch, 0.75. I've measured that, and I'm going to reconnect that to the chest line. So I'm cutting this out because the back is not straight. This is to eliminate zipper bulge after sewing. So from this 3/4 of an inch I came in by, I'm going to remeasure for my zipper allowance the 1.5 inches I initially had, and I'm still going to reconnect to the chest line, as you can see what I just did. So this would ensure that the puff at the back will be eliminated. So from this new zipper allowance line, I'm going to measure quarter of the waist measurement plus extra 1 inch for that. Remember that that will be taken in at the waist. So I've imputed that 9.5 inches, and then I'm going to add the 1.5 inches side seam allowance I already had added in the front part, and I'm going to connect. And as we know, the front half length and the back half length are usually not the same. The front half length is usually longer than the back half length. So to avoid the back drooping or going lower while the front part is upper, I'm going to remove some length from the center back. So I'm measuring 2 inches, you can take 1.5 inches. It all depends on the size of the bust. So I'm measuring 2 inches away from the center back, and I'll be reconnecting it to the side seam. So you can see how I went up. I'm going to connect this down to the side seam as I'm demonstrating. So this will be cut out. So I'm doing this because I did not draft a pattern for this, so I did not take a bust that. So to avoid the back dropping lower than where the half length is supposed to be, I'll be cutting this out. But you can actually do this after joining the front and the back together, then you shape your back part. But I want to do this now to avoid shaping it later. So for the neckline, I'm taking a neck width of 3.5 inches and a neck depth of 1.5 inches. So the neck width at in front and the back would be the same. So the neck depth is what is different. So the neck depth at the back is 1.5 inches, and I'll also take the half-inch joining allowance like I did in front. For joining the front shoulder to the back shoulder, I would connect. I would also recheck my measurements and then cut out the back parts. So as I was cutting, I noticed that I've not connected this line into the seam allowance, so I'm going to just extend this line into the seam allowance, then I'll continue cutting. So I've cut it out the back part, so I'm placing the back on the front on the back. You can see that the center front is longer than the center back. So but I've placed the front and the back, the side back on the front back. So I want to also reduce the length at the side for both the front and the back part. So I've placed them and they are equally placed. So from the lower part I came up, at the side part I came up by 1.5 inches, and I'm connecting it towards the center. You can see how I've connected. I placed the side front on top of the side back. You can see how I placed it the way it's supposed to be when sewn. So and I came off from the lower part 1.5 inches, and I'm pinning them together. So I'm going to trim out because I don't want it also to be drooping at the side. I want everything to be equal after being sewn together. So I'm going to trim this out, and then I'm going to remove the front from the back, so that when this is sewn everything will be equal. The half length will be equal all around. That is why I'm doing this. You can as well do this after sewing, but I decided to do this before sewing. So this is it. I'll quickly cut out the wadding for this. So for the wadding, I would not be explaining in details because I already have a video where I explained how you can pad your princess dart bustier. So I'm just going to quickly do this and then continue with other things. But one thing you have to note is that your wadding should stop at the under bust, and also for the neckline, when cutting the center front, make sure that the wadding stops at least 1 inch before the neckline, where your neckline is, so that it will allow you to turn your neckline with the lining. So I'll quickly cut this and then show you how to join them together. So I'll drop the link to the video on how you can correctly cut and pad your princess dart bustier in the description box. So after cutting the wadding, I'm going to fuse it on the main fabric at the wrong side of the main fabric. I'm going to iron it on because it has a fusible part, and then after doing that I'm going to join the center front and the side front together, starting from the lower part. I'll sew using half-inch seam allowance and join them together, and then for the back part I'm going to sew in the darts on both the main fabric and on the lining. So for the lower part, I've cut it out. So the length is the full length of the dress minus the half length, the upper bodice. So I have 22 inches here plus extra 2 inches, 1.5 inches hemming allowance and 1 inch for joining it to the upper bodice. And the width is the waist measurement times 3 multiplied by 3. So I'll divide this whole width into 2 and then further divide the back parts into 2 again. So I've joined the front part together. You can see what I have. I've notched and then ironed the seams open, and I've done the same for the lining piece as well. So I'm going to use the lining to turn the neckline and the sides. I'm going to place them right sides facing each other. I would arrange them very well, and then I'm going to sew on the neckline with 1/4 inch or anything less than 1/2 inch. I would sew all round. I'm going to notch around the seams and then I'll top stitch towards the lining side. I'll also use the lining to turn the sides. And also for the back, I've sewn in the darts on both the main fabric and on the lining. I'll use their corresponding linings to turn them as well. I'll turn the neckline, I'll notch and then top stitch towards the lining side, and also use the lining to turn the side, the zipper side and the other side for the back. I'll do that for the two back pieces. So I've done all this. I've turned the neckline and the sides, so you can see what I have. I'm going to turn out to the right side. So when I turn out, I'm going to also iron the seams I've just made on the neckline and the side so that everything relaxes properly. I'll also do the same for the back pieces. I've already turned them. I'll also iron them properly. And now the next thing I'm going to do will be to join the front and the back by their shoulder and then by the sides. So I'm going to place them on the corresponding shoulders, and I'll show you how to turn the shoulder area. So I'm going to hold them this way, right sides facing each other, the main fabric to the main fabric and the lining to the lining. Then I'm going to flip the lining, the other lining to the back. You can see what I'm doing, and I'll hold them properly and then sew using 1/2 inch allowance. I'm going to sew them together and then I'll sew them by the sides. I'll quickly cut the sleeves for this dress. I'm using a basic sleeve. Please pardon me, I'm going to be fast when cutting the sleeves. I won't be explaining very well because I already have a detailed tutorial on how to draft a basic short sleeve, and I'll drop the link in the description box. So for this, I'm using a cap's height of 4 inches. That is what I've measured from the top part, which is the acts as the sleeve head. Then I'm going to bring my joined upper body. So I'm going to measure what I have at the armhole. I'm going to check what I have from the shoulder to the chest line, the armhole opening. I measured and I have 8 inches. So I'm going to impute that 8 inches on this cap's height line I just drew, and then I'm going to make the sleeve head. So like I said before, I already have a video where I explained very well, and I'll drop the link in the description box. So the total length of this sleeve is 7 inches, and to that I've added extra 1.5 inches, 1/2 inch for attaching the sleeve head to the dress and 1 inch for the hemming allowance. So I'm just making a curl for the back sleeve head, and I also make a curl for the front sleeve head. So at the hem part of this sleeve, I'm going to impute half of the sleeve opening, round sleeve opening. Half of that I'm going to impute that at the hem of this sleeve, and I'm also using 1.5 inches side seam allowance. So I would use this when I cut this out. I'm going to use it to cut the lining, but the lining is going to be 1 inch shorter than the fabric for the sleeves. So when cutting out for the front, where the sleeve will be attached to the front armhole, remember to open them up before you cut that part out. So I'll also be cutting fabric for the pockets. There will be inner pockets to this, so I'm folding my fabric into 2 and into 4. I'm cutting for the 2 pockets together. So I have a length of 9 inches and the width of 9 inches. It's 9 inches by 9 inches how I folded, and I'm going to rule a straight line. As you can see from this straight line, I measured 8 inches, and the width also I measured 8 inches. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a slight curve enough to for the hand to fit in. So that is what I've done. I've done a slight curve in a D curve. So I'm going to just cut this out. So the fabric is folded into 4, so I'm cutting 2 pieces for each side of the pocket. So I'll go ahead and cut this out. For the lower part, I've cut out lining, and the lining is 3 inches shorter than the main fabric, and the width is 2 times the waist, and I've split them into 2, and the back I've further split into 2, and I'll just gather them like I did for the front and for the main fabric. So for the main fabric, I've hemmed one side and I've gathered the other. So for you to make a gathered stitch, you have to set your machine on the longest stitch and then run a stitch across without back stitching. So you just have to separate the thread you have there and just drag on one and keep on gathering till you gather to the size you want, as in the back will be gathered to the size of the quarter of the waist measurement, and the center part, the front, will be gathered to the half of the waist measurement. So you can see how I've done this one. I've also gathered for the center part, so I'll check if it is matching. So I'm going to gather them, and then I'm going to join the gathered part, the lower part, together, and I'm also going to attach the pockets to the lower part. So to join them together, I've placed them right sides facing each other, the right side facing each other. So I'm going to attach the pocket. So to do that, from the edge, from the waist part, the top edge, I'm going to measure at the sides. I'm going to measure 1.5 inches downward. So you can see how I place my tape. I'm measuring 1.5 inches, and I'm going to note that with my chalk. I'm going to note that on both the material for the front and the material for the back at the side. So I came down by 1.5 inches. So I'm going to place the pocket inward. You can see how I'm placing my pocket, right side of the pocket to the right side of the skirt part. So you can see how I've placed them together. So I'm going to pin them together here. This is where I'm going to attach this pocket at that 1.5 inches I came down by. Then I'm going to take the other pieces, the other piece of the pocket, and I'm going to place it on the material for the back part. So it's going to also be right sides facing each other, and the pocket, for you to know you placed it well, they should correspond, they should match each other. The one on the front part should match the one on the back part. So I've placed them right sides facing each other. I'm going to sew using 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to top stitch towards the pocket side. I'll also do that for the others, the skirts. So I'm going to then join them together. For me to join the whole skirt together, I'm going to place them as you see me demonstrate. I'm going to sew with 1 inch, and then when I get to the pocket side, I'll sew with 1/2 inch, and then down I'm going to sew with 1 inch. I'll do it for the two sides. So I've joined them together. You can see what I have. I've joined the front and the back part of the skirt together. So now I'm going to attach the upper bodice to the skirt part. So I've opened them up. Where I'm going to place them, I'm going to place them right sides facing each other, and I'm going to just attach them. And when attaching them, I'll make sure that the side seam on the skirt matches the side seam on the upper bodice. But when attaching, I'm going to make sure I have 1/2 inch left after the zipper allowance on the upper bodice. I would leave 1/2 inch on the skirt part for turning the side of the skirt with the lining. So I've pinned everything together. You can see what I have, and this is how I'm going to sew them together. You can see the extra 1/2 inch I left for turning with the lining. So after sewing them with 1/2 inch, joining the front part, the upper part with the lower part, I've brought my lining, I've gathered it, and I've also joined the sides together. Where the pocket is supposed to be on the lining, I left it unsewn. So what I'm going to do now is to place, you see how I placed my fabric. I'm going to place the right side of the lining is going to be touching the right side of the skirt part. You can see how I've placed them right sides facing each other. Then I'm going to pin, starting from that ½ inch I left for turning the side. I'm going to now sew the lining on this point and make sure the lining seam matches also with the skirt seam. After doing that, I'm going to use the lining to turn the skirt at the sides. So after doing that, I'm going to show you what I have. So I've joined them together. You can see what I have. This is the front part. So when I turn to the back, you can see how neatly finished it is because of the way I attached the lining. Okay, so you can see that opening I have on the lining for the pocket, so you can bring out your pockets this way. So all that is left now is to attach the zipper to the back part and also attach the basic sleeve to the armhole of this dress. So I have my zipper. So from the waistline, you're going to measure about 7 to 8 inches. That is where the zipper would stop from the half length. So you can sew up the remaining part when you measure that 7 to 8 inches where the zipper will stop down, and then sew up the remaining part, attach the zipper, and also make sure you attach your sleeve. You can also make a basic sleeve like I did here, or you can make any sleeve of your choice and also attach that to the dress. So here are my sleeves. I've turned them with the lining. Okay, so when attaching the sleeve, make sure that the corresponding sleeve, the front side of the sleeve is corresponding with the front side of the armhole so that you can place it correctly. So after attaching this, I'll show you the end product of this dress. So guys, at the end of everything, this is what the dress looks like. I've attached the zipper and I've also attached the sleeves. Thank you guys for watching. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you're yet to subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so that you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. Until my next video, bye.